So it's Thursday, and I'm excited. Why am I excited on a Thursday? Well, this weekend is the return of triathlon racing to North America. So this Sunday is the Ironman 70.3 Little Elm. This is an inaugural event down in the Dallas area. There are athletes coming from all over the state of Texas and all over the country and all over the world to kick things off. So I am super excited to get the community back together, have racing come back. There is a stacked pro field that is going to be partaking in this race. So lots of excitement going on, and I am here for it. So going to hit a couple things before then, but before this podcast is over, triathlon season will have kicked off, and I will be giving my feedback and some of my experience from the return of racing there in Dallas, Texas. So before that, I'm going to hit a couple little things here that unfortunately a little late for those racing at Little Elm, but it's going to be really applicable and really useful for everyone else racing later in the season. So I'm going to talk about race simulations and then the taper. Oftentimes the taper is misunderstood, it is misexecuted, and athletes aren't set up for their best possible race because they didn't taper properly. You work too hard, too long to make those mistakes. So we want you at your best when you arrive at that start line. And that really comes down to how well and how properly you taper. So these race simulations are done so that you can test everything. This is going to be your gear, your pacing, your hydration, nutrition, electrolytes, everything that you're going to do on race day. We want to replicate your race conditions as closely as possible. For the few that have the opportunity to actually go and do these on the actual race course, that is going to be fantastic. Now, I fully realize that most don't have the opportunity to do that, so replicate the conditions as best you can. So if it's a hilly course, try to get in some hills. If it's a flat course, try to ride flats, try to match the environment as you are able to, but the closer you're able to get to the conditions and to the course, the better off you're going to be. But you can still get in a really high quality race simulation without that. So what we want to do is start with a swim. So this is a best case scenario open water swim. And I understand that not everyone has access to open water at all times of the year. So I know for some of you guys, your open water venues are still frozen over. But if possible, get in that open water swim. And this is one where we want to try to get in the full distance. So if you are racing a 70.3, try to get in a 1.2 mile swim. If you're racing a full distance event, try to get in that 2.4 mile swim. And a couple things here we want to really focus on and dial in prior to race day. So first, before we even get in the water, we want to make sure that our wetsuit is in good condition and that it still fits. So this is something I did about 2 weeks ago. And I realized I haven't put on my wetsuit in probably more than a year. And I wanted to make sure that it was still in good condition and it still fit. So the neoprene can dry out and it can get to a point where it's even dry rotting. And so we want to make sure that, again, it's still in good condition and still hydrated. So these wetsuits actually do kind of dry out, and that neoprene gets dry, it cracks, and then bad things happen. So make sure it's in good shape and then make sure it still fits. So we're coming out of the winter and perhaps put on some weight back in the holidays. Maybe you don't have it all the way off yet. So we want to make sure that that wetsuit is still fitting properly. So that's something we'll talk about on a different day, but it should take you probably 10 to 15 minutes to get a wetsuit on, especially a sleeve suit. And you should probably have a decent sweat working by the time you get that suit on. If you can just pull on that suit like a pair of pants and a shirt, then it doesn't fit properly. It should be very form-fitting. And something to consider is that your body is actually going to compress in the water. So if it is tight on land, that's a good thing. If it's loose on land, it's only going to get looser once you get in the water. So we want to make sure that that wetsuit is fitting properly. Next, the first thing we want to do in doing these open water swims is make sure that you are comfortable in open water. This is a very common issue that new athletes and seasoned athletes alike can have issues with. So my advice here is just to spend a few seconds, a few minutes, as long as you need right there at the entry of the water, just getting comfortable being in the water. Get used to the feeling of that wetsuit, get used to the feeling of the water coming into the suit, and just do what you need to do to get comfortable in there. It may just be, if it's a beach interest, it may just be like a slow walk in, gradually getting deeper and deeper. If you have to jump in, maybe it's just that you jump in, but then grab onto the dock or whatever it is that you jumped off of and just get comfortable. First thing is obviously the body getting wet. And then next is going to be start with the face. So this is actually something that can trigger that fight or flight when cold water hits your face. So we want to make sure that we don't have a reaction when that happens. So you don't necessarily even have to go all the way under. You can just splash some of that cold water on your face, or just put your face down in the water and then do what you can to get fully submerged in there. Now you should be fully acclimated to the water. That is going to go a long way to ensure that you don't have any panic attacks or anything like that, at least from the wetsuit standpoint, from the water temperature and those kinds of things. Obviously, once you get in some traffic, sometimes people have issues with that. But this is going to mitigate as much of the water, the wetsuit, and those kinds of things as possible. The more times you do this, the more comfortable you're going to be, and the lower the risk of actually having one of these panic attacks is going to be. So once you're comfortable, you feel good, you've gotten acclimated to the water, now you're going to start your swim. So really, our intent here is to practice those open water skills, primarily swimming as short a distance as possible while still meeting the minimum distance. So what I mean by that is swimming straight. And in order to swim straight, we need to be efficient in sighting. So that is going to be probably the most important thing to really practice, really dial in during these race simulations in the swim, is making sure that your sighting is good and that you are swimming straight. So if you find that you are having to make course corrections every time you sight, then you need to sight more often. If you find that you are right on course every time that you are sighting, then you might be able to extend the amount of time between sights. And then that's kind of how you can kind of calibrate how often you need to sight. Is we want to sight as often as necessary to stay straight, but not more frequently than that, because we lose a little bit of our technique, we lose some speed, we lose some momentum when we sight. So we want to sight as few times as possible, but again, we really want to make sure that we are swimming straight. So it's a balancing act between sighting enough to stay straight and on course, but minimizing the amount of time that we are spending out of our good body position and proper technique. So those are our intentions for the swim. Get a feeling for what it's like to cover that distance, get an idea of how long it's going to take for you to cover that distance, and then see if you run into any issues while out there. Then you can address those prior to race day. Ideally, I would say do that on a Friday or Saturday, and then the following day, get in your bike and run a race simulation. So the next step is to think about dinner. Uh, and the bike run day is a much bigger, longer day. So that's why I say practice your dinner the night before that one, as opposed to the day before your swim. So if you have a go-to meal that you have that you know works for you, that you like, that your body likes, go with that and practice it one more time just to confirm everything is still good. If not, you don't want to have a meal for the first time before your big event, because you never know when things can happen. So my recommendation here is to find what you like, what works for you, what is going to set you up for success, and then you can see how your body handles that overnight, how your body handles that in the morning, and then you'll confirm that that is either the meal for you, or maybe you need to try something else. Next is wake up time. Yeah, it's probably going to be real early, but it's going to be real early on race day. So what we want to do here is establish a routine. The more routine you establish, the more natural it's going to feel on race day, the more comfortable you're going to be. You know exactly what you're going to do, you know how you do it. So going through that routine is a good thing. So if you have the privilege of sleeping in your own bed the night before a race, this is going to be great, because it's going to be exactly what it is. Most of us don't have the luxury of sleeping in our own beds the night before a big race. So we still want to establish this routine, our plan. What do we do and in what order? How does it feel? So again, what time are we waking up? What are the things that we need to do that morning to prepare for the race? And then what are we going to have for breakfast? So think about breakfast is going to be a primary fuel source for your swim. Obviously, we have some opportunities to take in some nutrition prior to the race, but during the swim, unless you've got a gel stuck down the sleeve or something like that, not opportunities for consuming calories on the swim. So that is going to primarily be what you have for breakfast. So think about that, test that, use that in these race simulations, and set yourself up for success there. Know that it's going to work well for you. And then we're going to head out onto whatever bike course that you have. Again, best case scenario, if it is accessible and safe to ride the course, go for it. But if not, do what you can to replicate that course. And you also have those opportunities to do these virtually. So it's a little bit different. Obviously, riding out on the road certainly has advantages. And then doing a virtual race simulation indoors on a trainer has some advantages as well. I would say the biggest advantage is having Ruby, which has the Ironman courses on them. You can actually practice your race there. You can see what it's like. You can experience the climbs, the descents, the turns, all those kinds of things, and get a really good feel for what you're going to experience on race day. But obviously, there are some things that you're going to miss out on while out there on the road. Your wind conditions and things like that are going to be different. So whatever it is you decide to do, again, pros and cons both ways, whatever's going to work better for you. We want to make sure that we are testing everything. So this is primarily going to be those four horsemen that we've talked about time and time again. So what is your pacing? How many watts are you going to be holding for the course? What does your heart rate look like? What is your maximum heart rate? All those kinds of things are going to help determine your pacing. Next is your nutrition. How many calories are you going to consume on an hourly basis? And in what form are you going to be consuming those calories? So think about how much capacity you have on your bike to carry a certain amount of calories, especially if you are consuming liquid calories and you're limited by how many bottles you can carry. Are you going to be using on course nutrition? And if so, you can set that up, especially like if you're doing loops on the course, maybe you're just looping back to your car, looping back to your house. You can kind of utilize that as an aid station. And from there, we also want to work on our hydration and electrolytes, and then our cooling protocols. So again, those four horsemen of our pacing, nutrition, hydration, and cooling. We want to make sure we have all four of those dialed in and everything is good to go. Now, this should not be the first time that you are focusing on those. Hopefully, every session that you've been doing, you've been working on that. So now this is just that final opportunity to know that what you've been doing is good to go and going to set you up for success. So here kind of depends on time or distance. Ideally, you will do the distance that you are doing in the race. I would say, especially if you're doing a 70.3, you should feasibly able to get in 56 miles. Now, if you're doing a full distance race, I get that it can be very time consuming to get in a full 112 miles. So I would say a minimum of 5 to 6 hours for that 112-mile mark. And that, again, is going to allow you to feel exactly what you're going to experience. What does it feel like to be out there for that long, to cover that many miles? How does your nutrition hold up? How does your plan hold up? And keep in mind here, I've used this saying a whole bunch of times. Mike Tyson said it. Everyone has a plan till you get punched in the face. And I will say, if your plan doesn't go perfectly while you're doing these race simulations, that's okay, because that's going to happen on race day as well. So even that is part of it. Making those adjustments on the fly, that is good practice for what you're going to experience on race day. So don't sweat it. Don't worry about it. In fact, I've told people in the past, expect three things to go wrong on race day, and just acknowledge them when they come, deal with it, and then move on. And that's going to help you stay in a good positive mentality and minimize what it is and get back on track. So again, what we're looking to do here, get in that full distance, test everything, and ensure that you've got everything set. The other thing we want to work on here is our gear. So think about what kit you're going to wear on a race day. Don't save that kit to be worn on the first day or race day for the first time. We want to make sure that it is comfortable, that you're not having any chafing or any discomforts that way. Or even if you do get some chafing, maybe it's a simple solution of just applying some lube there. But we want to test the kit and make sure that it is going to work well for you and it's going to hold up for the duration of this race as well. So sometimes you may have a kit that is comfortable for maybe a 1 hour, 2 hour ride, but then if you extend that out to 112 miles, that's going to take you 5, 6, 7 hours. It might not hold up for that duration. So again, we want to make sure that the kit is going to hold up for you. Also consider your helmet. Most folks are going to wear an aero helmet. We know that is a valuable time saver. And in most cases, they are faster than a standard road helmet. So most of us are going to be utilizing that. So get used to the feeling. They obviously do fit and feel a little bit different than your standard road helmet. So again, make sure that that is going to be comfortable for the duration of the race. Everything's in good shape and good to go there. Next, on to the bike. Whatever modifications that you make for race day, go ahead and make those for these race simulations. Back in the day, when I first got into triathlon, we were all running tubular tires on race day, and they were real expensive and real hard to change. Fortunately, technology has brought us a long way where we really don't change out wheels as often. But maybe if you're running a disc in the back, go ahead and throw that on and make sure that the biggest thing there is making sure that your cassette is properly indexed. So when you swap cassettes over, sometimes the derailleur is in a little bit different spot for those, little different gear ratios. So making sure that you're getting good clean shifting with that different cassette on there. Same thing with the brakes, making sure the brakes don't rub, anything like that. So again, any changes that you're going to make to your bike for race day, go ahead and test those out in the race simulation. So now on to the run. My recommendation here is to get in at least a 45 to 60-minute run off the bike. There are a couple reasons for that. I would say you could extend that up to as long as 90 minutes. Can actually be effective both for the 70.3 and full distance. But I would say, again, minimum of 45 to 60 minutes. And really the intent there is to really see what are the implications of what you did on the bike. On those shorter off the bike runs, sometimes we're able to kind of cheat through those. The bike is a lower impact, lower intensity discipline, so we don't necessarily have to nail our hydration, nutrition, pacing, all those kinds of things like we do for the run. So we want to make sure is that we are coming off the bike with all of those things topped off and as close to a fresh start feeling as possible. So hydration topped off, nutrition topped off, making sure that we didn't overbike with our pacing, and making sure that our core temperature is under control. So again, those things may not really show up and manifest in the first 20 to 30 minutes. So that is why I recommend going longer. So this is really a kind of a twofold intent. So this longer run off the bike, one, is going to tell us how well we executed on the bike. So if we are beginning to experience difficulties in these first couple miles, generally that means we did something wrong on the bike. So that is going to give us the opportunity to go back and fix that, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a pacing, nutrition, hydration, cooling issue, whatever it is, or a combination thereof. We need to go back and fix that. You should be able to run this initial 45, 60, maybe even 90 minutes off the bike at a comfortable pace. It shouldn't feel like you're working really hard yet. These should be relatively easy miles, especially the fact that we are starting either a half marathon or a marathon. It should be a pretty easy pace. We want to build into it from there. So again, these should be pretty easy miles. And if they are, then you will know that you had a well executed bike, and all those plans that you have are good to go from there. So like the bike, we want to test our gear. So whatever you're going to utilize for the bike run, for the run, we're going to utilize that here. So primarily, this is going to be your shoes. So especially if you've been holding out on those fancy carbon plated shoes or a specific race shoe, go ahead and put some miles on it and make sure that everything is good. Make sure that you're not getting blisters or any other kind of pain or discomfort with those shoes. If you're wearing a cap, a visor, wearing a fuel belt, anything like that, going to want to make sure that you are testing that out and you have everything good to go. Again, what we're looking for here is to ensure that your race plan is good. My recommendation is to set up an aid station. So out there on the Ironman courses, you have aid stations approximately every mile. So maybe this is just a run around the neighborhood, around the park, something like that. It can be as simple as dropping your tailgate if you got a pickup, or just having a cooler set out by your car, and replicate those offerings that they have at the aid stations. So your water, your ice, maybe even some cola, which is one of my favorites from those aid stations. But that's going to give you that opportunity to test and practice, so you'll know exactly what it is that you are going to do, and work through that. And once again, know that you have a good protocol for the run. So best case scenario, I would say to get in at least 2 of these race simulations. They can be done back to back, but I would generally recommend a week of recovery in between. And we want to have these late in the phase so that your fitness is largely there. So a lot of times I will prescribe these as some of the last sessions. A lot of times this is weeks 2 and 4 out from race day with the athletes that I work with, and they head in to the taper. So we replicate this numerous times just to give that opportunity to ensure that everything is working properly. So we want to pay attention. What are those things that went right in these sessions? And then what are those things that didn't go quite as to plan? And then we have an opportunity to adjust those and fix it prior to race day. So once again, once you're done with these race simulations, you head into race day with a high level of confidence, knowing that you're ready to go out and have a great race. Once you've got your race simulations dialed in, you've got everything all set, now it's time to taper. So the intent of the taper is to rest and to recover as to maximize your performance on race day. Allow your body to reach its peak so that you can perform at your best. Now, generally, we do training that is going to produce adaptations. These adaptations take anywhere from approximately 10 to 14 days to be realized. So that means a session that you're doing today, you're not going to receive the full benefit of that session until 10 to 14 days later. So this is kind of why it revolves around, most the tapers are somewhere give or take 2 weeks, because oftentimes a session done later, it may not even be fully realized by the time it's time to race. So if you say you were to do a long session 4 days out from your race, you wouldn't realize the benefit of that. In fact, you would actually only be realizing the downside of it. You'd have all of the strain, the damage, all those kinds of things that come along with those training sessions, but without the adaptation that is going to produce later. So we do all this training to produce those specific adaptations to build our fitness, prepare us for the race. But then we reach a certain point where we no longer have time to make more adaptations, and we need to allow the body to rest and recover. So that is the taper. So the taper speaks to a gradual reduction in overall training load. So a common mistake that we see is athletes get 2-3 weeks out and they make a drastic drop in their training load. They cut their training volume in half or more, and they think it's allowing their body to rest and recover. And to an extent, it is, but it all is also putting your body into some sort of a hibernation state, as opposed to keeping it active and primed for. It's going more so into that hibernation state. So we want to have a gradual reduction in training. And how long that is really going to depend on how long your race is. So the longer the race, the longer the taper. So if you're doing a sprint race, you may only need 3 or 4 days for your body to be ready to go and do that short, high intensity distance. A little bit longer for Olympic, longer for 70.3, longer for the full distance. So generally, when we talk mostly about the 3 and full distance. So generally what we see there is, I would say, a minimum of about 10 days and a max of 2.5 weeks, something like that. And again, it's going to vary based on each individual, things like age and body mass, performance level, all these things factor into it. But what I want to do here is give you just a couple guidelines. So again, the longer the race, the longer the taper is going to be. And they are discipline independent. So just because we say the taper is starting, that doesn't mean that it's starting across the board. As a rule, what we want to do is begin to taper the running first, because the running is the highest impact and causes the most damage to the body. It causes the most recovery demand. So we want to back off of the running first to allow, especially the legs, the lower limbs, all of that to heal from all the running that we've done. Next is the bike. Again, very low intensity, but a little high, very low impact, but higher intensity. So we're going to taper off of that next. And then the swim, obviously very low impact and lower intensity. So generally we can taper the swim for the shortest period of time. Now, those are just kind of rules of thumb. And obviously it's going to be different for each athlete. But just because you start the taper, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to begin reducing swim, bike, and run. You can take into consideration what are your strengths and weaknesses. Where do you maybe need to get in a couple more sessions, and take that adjust your taper accordingly for that. As we reduce the training volume, we want to replace that with some intensity. So these last couple weeks are largely low intensity, a lot of zone 1, a lot of zone 2. So what the body is used to is zone 1, zone 2, and a relatively high duration of that. So as we begin to drop that duration back, the body is kind of thrown off. So what we want to do here is to begin to replace some of that training load with more intensity. And generally, this is going to be some race pace work. So a lot of times in these long course races, we're racing in zone 3. Now, we don't always do a whole lot of zone 3 in our training. There is some, but we're primarily training either in that aerobic zone 1, zone 2, or we're pushing it higher, zone 4, zone 5, into that anaerobic zone. Zone 3 is kind of that black hole where it's neither aerobic nor well, it's that crossover point and not as valuable of training. So we don't spend a whole lot of time there, but it is where we race generally. So sometimes again, depends on performance level and distance. You may be at a high zone 3, you may be at a low zone 3. You could be at a zone 4 or zone 2 for these distances. Again, it all depends on your performance level and your biometrics. But what we want to do here is make sure that we are replacing some of that training volume with some race pace intensity. And again, it's just a great opportunity to really get a feel for what those paces are. And then just a note, it is important to adjust your caloric intake throughout the taper. So oftentimes we are ravenously hungry throughout our training phases. We're eating a lot. Some folks are fortunate enough to be able to get away with eating whatever they want through those large training blocks. But as we begin to drop that training load back, remember that we are not burning as many calories. So what we don't want to do is actually put on weight here in those last couple weeks, last couple days as our race approaches. Make sure that you're adjusting your caloric intake appropriately, especially in that 2 weeks out or so. As we get closer, obviously there you're going to start to implement your things like your carbo loading, and then really close to the race, we are then going to implement our sodium loading in there. Another tip is sleep is absolutely critical throughout the taper. So especially in that 1 to 2 weeks out from race day, that is really going to be our opportunity to bank sleep. So training volume is down, so you're not having to get up as early. So maybe you have some opportunities there to bank some extra sleep, maybe an extra hour or whatever it is every morning. That's fantastic. Maybe on the weekend, you're not doing 6-hour bike rides anymore. So maybe you have the opportunity to get in a nap. Those are going to be really good. So again, we're allowing the body to recover, and sleep is when our body maximizes recovery. So more sleep means more recovery. Generally, we are still at home at that point. We generally don't travel till week of the race. So you're still in your own bed and your familiar environments, and you don't have the stress and worries of travel. So great opportunity there. And then even season vets don't sleep well as race day approaches, especially the night before. I've given this tip for years. Don't expect to sleep well the night before the race, but know that that's okay. There have been lots of finishes, PRs, world championship qualifications after really bad nights of sleep. So kind of just expect to not sleep well the night before the race, but bank as much sleep as possible prior. All right, so that is our race simulation and taper. Now I'm going to head to Dallas and kick off race season. Be right back. All right, I am back, and as promised, triathlon season is now underway. It is now Monday. We started on Thursday. We're back finishing the week. Yesterday, we had the kickoff of the 2026 Ironman racing season in North America with the 70.3 Little Elm. So going to hit a couple things here, give you a little insight as to what went down over the weekend and some thoughts. So first, I want to share a little bit of the swag that was given out. So I'm guessing this is going to be pretty indicative of all the events for the year. They generally have a template they kind of use, but it's a pretty cool shirt for 70.3 Little Elm. Definitely feeling the color in it. Not usually my palette, but I love this. It's a good, nice material. It's going to be a great training shirt. So looking forward to that. As always, there is a bag included. So this one, a little different as well. It's a kind of a big dry bag, matching the colors and all that. So zipper top and just one big compartment, but it's great for wetsuits or anything like that gets wet and nasty. So nice bag, couple bottle carriers on the side. And then at the finish line, a little different this year. Usually you get a cap in the finished medal, at least for Little Elm. They gave a towel out. So this is the towel given out at the finish line. Go. So nice little towel there. So again, not totally sure, but my guess is this is what's going to be given out at least at the 70.3s. So not totally sure what they'll do at Ironman, but I'd be willing to bet that 70.3s will have more of those towels given out. And final reveal here, the medal given out. Let's see if I can get this a little closer. So got the number 1 there for the inaugural event. Also first race of the year. So why do I have all of this stuff? Well, kind of a convoluted story. So I signed up for this race back in September, and it's been on my plan. And actually, midweek last week, I had something come up and wasn't sure if I was going to be able to race. So I reached out to Ironman and said, "Hey, could I defer 2 weeks to the race that is in Galveston?" And I didn't hear anything back, so I figured I'm just going to race. In fact, Thursday afternoon, I got my QR code to check in. I was like, "Yeah, everything is good." But then shortly thereafter, I actually got an email saying, "Complete your registration for 70.3 Waco," which is not until October. So I just threw out there, "Hey, would it be possible to defer 2 weeks to Galveston, not like 7 months to Waco?" So I didn't hear anything back. I asked, like, "Hey, am I still registered for this race?" I touched base with a buddy on site. He said, "No, you're not registered." So I was really bummed out. And literally, at the time I was recording the first half of this podcast on Thursday, my good friend Joanna reached out and said, "Hey, would you be interested in swimming on a relay?" And I said, "Heck yes." So a lot less packing involved in that. So after that podcast recording, I went up, I packed my goggles and some swim trunks and headed off to Texas the following morning. So had a great time there. And so my job was going to be to swim the 1.2 miles in the race. Mother Nature threw a curveball. And I knew when they announced a race in March in Texas, the weather was going to be an issue. Honestly, I can say I did not forecast or predict that it would be crazy high winds that would be the issue. I was expecting a overcast, cold, wet, nasty day. It actually turned into a really nice day apart from this crazy wind. I don't know what the exact numbers were, but like 30, 40 miles an hour was thrown out. I would say sustained winds over 20 miles an hour with gust. I don't know how high. I saw numbers 40, 50, but triathletes, they're worse than fishermen on the exaggerations. Every race, I always say, has the toughest conditions ever. But I will say, objectively, this race had some very, very, very difficult conditions due to the winds that were out there, kind of borderline on even being a little bit unsafe. From pros to seasoned vets to first timers, all complained about that wind. So what does that have to do with me? Well, at first, there was talk of the swim being shortened. And then as we were there in transition yesterday morning, they made the announcement that Ironman and local officials had decided to cancel the swim. It made a lot of sense. There was a lot of motion out there. And with the wind, there's no way that the kayaks and water support could stay in place. So when we have that issue, obviously safety becomes an issue. So it's going to be canceled every time. Visibility is limited, or we can't have those safety personnel in place. It's going to be canceled. So no shocker, definitely made the right call. So I got my medal for doing literally nothing. So I was part of the relay team and all I was doing was swimming, and the swim was canceled. So like I said, I did absolutely nothing. So that is the easiest medal I have ever received. It is also the least I've ever earned. But I did cheer on my teammates that rocked the relay. So it was a good day. So certainly a highlight of the weekend was getting to connect with some of my friends and training partners that I haven't been able to see in a long time since moving away from Texas. It was great to get to see them, spend time with them, and get caught up with them. I had a great house full of friends that we stayed with over the weekend and had a really good time with them. We had some great support from Frisco Tri Club. It was great to meet members of that club. They were a great host. Literally, this race was in their backyard. They have training rides out there, so they know the venue well, they know the area well, and they did a lot to help make sure that this race went on. So shout outs to Amanda, shout outs to Chelsea. It was great to meet you guys and see you guys out there on the course. Saw so many friends, so many people. It was great. Crystal was smoking fast out there. Congratulations on your World Championship qualifications. Shout out to Tina, who headed up our events with Team Varlo. Had some really great events and really cool to get to connect with all my Varlo teammates out there at the race, and everyone did really well. So all in all, it was a fantastic weekend of racing. Really looking forward to getting to do it all over again in 2 weeks down in Galveston, as well as Oceanside in the Southern California area. So here we are. We're kicked off. We are going. It is race season, and we're going to be going hot and heavy now. Almost every weekend, we've got some real exciting events going, especially here early on. This is just one of 3 events in Texas in a 7-week span. So we have 70.3 Galveston, or 70.3 Texas in Galveston in 2 weeks, and then Ironman Texas in Woodlands just 3 weeks after that. So lots of racing coming up here real soon. So a little bit about the race itself. The town of Little Elm was very accommodating. I know they played a big role in bringing Ironman to the Dallas area. So shout out to them. The mayor was on site, and they had their whole host of emergency support from their fire, police, EMS, all those guys were great. The venue itself was in a park. It had some really nice amenities. From the ones we didn't use, they had some great playgrounds and ball fields and all that. The beach along the lake was really nice, and the water was cold. There was a lot of conversation of that leading into the race, but I will say the water was nice, it was clean, decent visibility, and I did have the opportunity to get in and do a practice swim the day before, and the water was, I don't know the exact temperature. What I saw was 62 in the morning. I swam in the afternoon. I feel like it was warmer than that, but I will say it was actually really nice. It was a great lake to swim in, and the city itself really turned out. There was a lot of great restaurants around. It was tons and tons and tons of dining options. You had all your stores, your retail, grocery, Walmart, all those things that you need. So it really is a good venue for that. The first day we were there, I will say parking kind of turned into a bit of a nightmare, but huge shout out, huge props to everyone involved there. After that, it got much, much smoother. It was much easier to get in and out of the park. So it's an inaugural event. There are going to be issues. You can't really judge them based on the issues that have. It's more so judging on how they respond to the issues. And I will say they responded in this case very, very well. So other than the weather, obviously they had to make some adjustments and some calls on that. Management was great, and the city and Ironman really did a good job here with the race in Little Elm. So the course itself, obviously I didn't get to test out any of the course on my own, but I did get to see a lot of it, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from the athletes that did get to do at least the portions that everyone did do. So as I mentioned just a minute ago, I did have the opportunity to get in the water and do a practice swim the day before. It was in a much smaller roped off area that is a beach that is open to the public to swim. So you could swim probably, 50, 200 meters along this roped off section, but it's water and it's swimming. So it gives you the opportunity to get into the water, feel the temperature. I hadn't swum in a wetsuit in a long time. So that got me feeling good for race day. They did have the buoys set out, and I was really looking forward to getting to actually swim on the course, but hopefully next year things will go better and the swim will go off as planned. Transition was nice, not too far from the lake itself. It was set up in a parking lot, and it was huge. I think there were something like 2,400 athletes in the race. There were two major sections of transition set up, and plenty of space for everyone. And I will say it was a really nice transition area. And another nice thing is the finish line was right there adjacent to transition. So made getting around, spectating, all those kinds of things real nice. They did a great job of switching from the regular start, transitioning over to kind of that last minute audible of switching to a time trial start. It was very orderly and done in a timely manner. Basically in numerical order, they had folks file out. They used the same beep for the swim. They did a 5-second count. Originally, they were sending off 2 cyclists every 5 seconds. And then what they realized was the pros were going so fast that they were actually going to be coming back into the same chute, which is bike in, momentarily. So they sped it up, and they went from 2 lines to 3 lines. They got everybody out onto the course safely. And then I think it was maybe 10, 15 minutes at most before the first cyclist started coming back in. So transition was great. I didn't get to see much of the bike course. I heard that there were a lot of rough roads. There was also some sections of rumble strip that had to be crossed. I think you crossed over rumble strips 6 times. Unfortunately, there was one of the professional females that was hit by a car. From what I've heard, it was not a major incident and no major damage or harm done to her, thankfully. But that did happen, as it sometimes does. And then the bike course was definitely hilly, definitely more elevation than a lot of people expect for Texas. But I think it was probably a fair course. a good course that, again, if you're not having these 20, 30 mile an hour sustained winds with some crazy gust in there, is probably a pretty great bike course other than the road conditions. But sometimes that doesn't always work out for us. I think they said something like the roads get good after mile 39 or something like that. So it's only like the last 17 miles have good roads. So you're kind of grinding your teeth for the first 2/3 of the race. So hopefully we'll make some improvements there, fix a couple things, and see that on the bike course. And then the run is largely all contained within that same park. So it's nice. You're not having to mess with intersections and traffic and that sort of thing on the run course. No closed roads or anything like that. So it was a short, maybe quarter-mile run from transition to the loop course. So it was a 3-loop course through this park, mostly along their walking trails. So picture, like most parks, it's a sidewalk, but maybe twice as wide. So plenty of room for everybody. There was kind of on the backside about a mile stretch of where it was not paved. It went to more of a trail, dirt surface on that. It was about a mile long. And I will say, from what I saw of the course, and there was some video shot in there, it looked like a really great run course. I wish I could have partaken of it. It looked like a fun run. A little bit of rolling hills, nothing major. There weren't any climbs or descents or anything like that, but it wasn't pancake flat to get you boring. I kind of went through some areas where you were kind of in some trees, and then you were in some more of like open field areas. And then obviously where you make the loop, that was where we had all the team tents were set up, great support along there. And then just like coming in, once you completed your 3 loops, it was just a short little stint back to the finish line, which put you right back to transition. So it was super easy to collect your gear and all that afterwards, other than the fact that once again, we were getting blown around. Literally, it was hard just to stand up. We were filthy after being out there for hours. We're in a park, so there was dust and dirt and leaves constantly being blown. Our eyes were gunky, noses were gross. It was just, the wind definitely made the day a challenge, even for those of us that were just supporting and spectating. I think it's one of those where if I had to go back and grade the course, I would give it kind of like probably a B for the swim course. Just nothing too exciting, but I think it's a good course. Bike course, based on what I heard, maybe going to give that a C. Just because of the road conditions, the rumble strips, that sort of thing. And I think the run course itself is going to be an A. I would actually be excited to go out and run that. So if I were to do this race next year, I would probably do it as a relay again. And this time, instead of taking the swim, I would love to get out there and do that. So that is a wrap on Ironman 70.3 Dallas Little Elm. But we are just getting started with the 2026 race season. I could not be more excited. So I look forward to continuing to help athletes, work with athletes as they go into these races. I look forward to supporting and getting to meet you guys out there at these races, and I wish you all the best.